Welcome to the Agility Platform training and demo session. In this video, I'll walk through the Agility Platform to show how it works, what it's designed to do, and how its core features support client and operational needs. We'll step through the main areas of the platform, look at key workflows, and highlight how the platform presents data, improves visibility, and supports better outcomes for clients. This session is intended as a practical walkthrough, so you can understand how the platform is used in real scenarios and how it delivers value across different use cases. Let's get started. When you first log in, you will be greeted by this view. This is the initial view that all clients see when they first log in. On the top right-hand side, you'll have the option to select your preferred view. The options are as follows. Accounts payable. This is the ideal view for anyone in the AP department. This is a brief overview of any notifications around invoices, any invoices that are unpaid or awaiting approval, as well as the total spent in the last payment run. Asset Manager view is for anyone within your organization that is an asset manager. This view narrows down any assets that users are responsible for or assigned to. The button on the bottom right, Show All, will show all assets within the system within your organization structure. Project Officer view is for anyone within the organization that is in charge of projects. Typically, we find that most organizations don't have a specific project manager. However, this view does give oversight of the projects in your organization. Finally, Client Admin view. This is the view Agility typically recommends for clients, and this is the view we'll work with. On the left-hand side of the main window, you will see the modules that you are subscribed to, as well as any that you may not be subscribed to. Any with a green tick will be subscribed modules, any that have a red X will not. Core subscription is the main subscription that tracks energy and water reporting. This module is how Agility will turn data into usable knowledge for clients. Projects is the additional module for adding projects into the system. This module will input projects against assets or accounts. The emissions module is the module for reporting on all emissions. With this module activated, Agility converts all usage data into emissions based off the ENGAS framework. Meters is the reporting from sub and smart meters in real time. Utility control is the finance system that helps consolidate your invoices into a single payment option with integration into your finance system. With each of these modules, you can click on them to get more information about them. This walkthrough will not dive deeply into projects, emissions, meters, or utility control, but to have a deeper dive into these modules, you'll need to use one of the other training videos. On the right-hand side of the main screen, you'll see your notifications area. This is real-time reporting on your current accounts and assets that sit within your organization structure in the system. The way the organization structure is as follows. Accounts are assigned to assets. Assets are assigned to org units. To have a look at your current organization structure, on the left-hand side, you can click on the organization structure link. This will show how your organization structure is set up. Now, with this hierarchy, it can go as deep as 4 levels. So you can have a main org unit and then 3 sub-levels, depending on how you want your organization structure to be inputted into the system. Going back to this view, we can see this Anywhere Council has 49 orphaned accounts and 16 orphaned assets. Orphaned accounts are accounts that are in the system that have not been assigned to assets, and orphaned assets are assets in the system that have not been assigned to an organization unit. Clicking on the orphaned accounts, it will show a list of all orphaned accounts that are available, that are in the system currently. We can change the view on how many it will show at one point in time. As you can see, it's showing all the orphaned accounts currently. For an account to show up in the system as being orphaned, Typically, it will be because a client has churned to a different supplier, and although we have received invoices from the supplier, this account has not been assigned to an asset. Please remember, when churning to a new supplier or opening a new account with a supplier, you need to let Agility know that this account has been opened or this account has been churned to a different supplier and to assign it to an asset. Assets can be assigned, or accounts can be assigned to assets and assets to organization units from within the client's dashboard. Typically, we suggest that clients become familiar with this tool. However, when there is more than a handful of accounts or assets that are unassigned, as is the case with this client, we would then send through a report, which the client will then fill out the blank spots in the report and send it back to Agility, who will then send it on to the operations team to update at a database level. I will cover that report later on. Going back to the orphaned accounts and orphaned assets. The orphaned assets, similarly to the orphaned accounts, orphaned assets are assets that aren't assigned to an organization unit. Again, these can be updated manually from within the system. However, with a large number like this, 49 orphaned accounts and 16 orphaned assets, we would generate the report and send it to the client to update in this CSV file. That being said, the client does have access to that same report in the PBI reporting system, which I will cover later. The other area or other thing to notice within this notification center is this 12 accounts not collecting. So this notification is for any accounts that are over 90 days without having received data. While this is a useful tool, it can be misleading at times. As you may be aware, some billing cycles for suppliers work on a 90-day cycle. So if a bill was expected on the 30th of the month and it's not received for 2 weeks, as can sometimes happen because it takes time for suppliers to send out invoices, this notification will automatically appear on the 1st of the following month. So please be aware that any of these accounts not collecting within 90 days or outside of 90 days, this can be a false reading as it may be just outside of that billing cycle. Agility staff do keep an eye on that when chasing up missing data for clients. So they are aware that this notification may be there, but they are also aware that it may be just outside of that billing cycle. If there are issues with collecting data, Agility staff will reach out to suppliers and will reach out to clients if need be. Data can come into Agility in 2 different ways, either through invoices from suppliers or through raw data files from suppliers. Some suppliers will add Agility as a secondary recipient for email. However, there are limited suppliers that will do that. In all other instances, either the client will on-forward any invoices to Agility, or Agility will be the main contact to receive the invoices and on-forward the invoices to the clients if they request. To receive the invoices, each client has what's called an Edge inbox. The Edge inbox is associated or directs to the processor, which will then read the invoice and generate all the data for the invoice, as well as a screenshot of the invoice in the system, which I will cover shortly. Looking to the left of the main screen, we can see a number of links down the side. The MeterMinder link, it ties into the Meter subscription, which when activated, you can have a look at the NEM12 data or the sub-metering data if you are subscribed to that Meter subscription. The utility control link will open up a number of sublinks that go towards the utility control or finance system. The projects link will directly go to the projects that are held within the system against the client's dashboard, and the Power BI reports goes to the reporting page. Looking at the projects link, you'll see it will show a number of projects, all the projects that are in the system. It will group, again, 10 per page. However, as per the previous page that I showed with options to change the number of entries, you can also choose up to 100 entries at a time to view. You will see that this projects tab will show the date, the status, name, asset, keywords, and the cost and savings that were put in for the project. While I'm not going to cover this in depth now, there will be more explanation available in the video covering the projects module. With utility control, when clicking on all bills, it will show all bills that are within the system at the moment that are waiting for something to happen against those bills. So as you can see, there's 2 bills in the system now, one approver to review and one to be paid. What it does show in the system at the moment is an alert status. It'll show the asset it's assigned to, the supplier, the date issued, due date, the amount, and the recommendations and whether it's been processed or not. Again, as per with the projects module, I will not be going deeper into this as there will be a specific video for utility control, as utility control is quite a powerful tool and needs its own video to cover it all. If we go further down to the left and click on dashboard, this will show a snapshot of the data for the client in the system. So for this Anywhere Council, we can see that for this specific, we can see how much they've saved on projects, their total utilities, energy and water, cost and consumption. Further down, you can see the top 5 assets, the historic comparison, overall spend, but the more important window here is this actual versus estimated. This is in regards to data completion. Now, the actual percentage will be on the left with the estimated on the right. The estimated percentage is how much the system has to estimate based on any data gaps that are in the system. It is not based on if a supplier has gone out and estimated usage for your account. In this instance, this Anywhere Council, it shows that Facility has 0% actual data and 100% estimated. The system is very good at estimating data, usually within about 5 to 10% variance of accuracy compared to what the actual data will be when received, as it bases the data off historic data against that specific account. If we continue on down the links on the left, we can have a look at the list of assets. With these list of assets, you are able to do a search. So if I was to look for something like a community centre, this council does not have a community centre against or within their organisation unit, but it will narrow down what assets it shows based on that. So if I was to search for light, anything with light in it would now be viewable. Further, next link down is the discussion tab, and this is for any comments or any discussions to be had for internal or for staff that have access to the platform. To be honest, the discussions tab does not get used very often, and that's simply because most clients will have their discussions internally through Teams or emails. If we go along a little bit further, we can see the administration tab. As I showed you before, the organization structure shows everything within the client's organization structure. If I were to click on one of these, it would then tell me relative information about that specific organization unit. So for Parks and Recreation, we can see any tags that are associated to it, any parent organization, and any responsible users. If we click on assets, we can see all assets within the system with complete figures of consumption and charges for any completed financial quarter from the start of the financial year till the end of that completed financial quarter. So for instance, recording this in February of 2026, means that we're halfway through Q3, so Q3 data will not be included in here. Half of the year. Again, we're able to increase the number of assets we can see in the one list, whether it be 25, 50, or 100. Here we can also add new assets. When adding a new asset, you need an asset name. Ideally, it would be good to choose whether it is leased or not, asset details, and then what organization unit to attach it to. If we go to accounts, we can then see a list of all accounts within the system for the client. Now, as per the assets, we can change the number of accounts we can see in the one screen, but we also have a button here to show all. So this will also show any closed accounts. So you'll notice originally there was 9 pages. This is now increased to 10 pages worth of accounts in the system because it's now showing closed accounts. Next, we'll go to bill approvers. Bill approvers will show any bill approvers that have been assigned to connection point IDs within the system. Be aware that you can assign more than one bill approver against each connection point, and it is something that can be utilized in a separate report in Power BI to be able to see exactly which bill approvers are assigned against which assets or connection point IDs, something I will cover shortly. The Users tab allows clients to add users into the system. Azility does not limit the number of users you can have and does not charge for users above a certain number. So a client can have as many users as they wish. With users, it will show all current active users. Clicking Show All will show every user that's ever been added into the system against the client. In this specific instance, there has been 90 or so users attached to this client. However, there's only approximately 20 active. Clients can add users themselves. While you can email support, we encourage clients to create their own new users in the system, as it is more time efficient. Creating a user is simple. You only need email, first and last name. And when you send that through, it will actually send an invitation to the user asking them to create a password before logging in. The other thing to note when adding users is you can choose what level of access they have, if they're getting bills to approve, how frequently, and also their role within the system. After that, there is contracts. This allows clients to add green contracts or PPAs into the system to assign accounts against them. This will be covered more in depth with instructions on how to do that in the emissions walkthrough video. Finally, suppliers under administration, and this will show all suppliers that are assigned to the client as well as what they're covering. So if a client was using Southeast Water, this would say water under the supply, whereas for these different suppliers, it's showing electricity and gas. The energy and bills and utility control links I will discuss, or they will be discussed in the utility control training video. Now, if we go over to the assets, here we will see a list of all the assets. Now, if we click on any of the assets, what will happen is a bunch of links will appear from the right-hand side. For this asset, and for all assets, you'll be able to view more details on the asset, edit, view the dashboard, view asset performance, accounts associated to the asset, projects, and any comments or discussion points. In the comments and discussions, you can also add images into those comments or discussions. However, as previously mentioned, we've found that most clients don't really use it, as all that communication happens internally through Teams and Outlook. Now, if I was to click on any of these links, so I'll view the dashboard for this asset, what will happen is those links have now generated on the left-hand side. And this is one of the great things with the platform. There is no need to go back and forth within the platform to be able to access anything. The idea is to keep moving forward within the platform. So I'm looking at the dashboard now for the administration building, but if I wanted to look at another asset, I don't need to go back into assets. There is a drop-down list on the top right-hand side, which I can also do a search for any assets in that drop-down list. Also, if I wanted to go back a couple of steps without having to click back multiple times, it actually generates a trail of links going back. Now, as we can see, this shows the overall information for this specific asset for start of financial year to the end of the last completed financial quarter, i.e. July to December. We can see what projects savings have been associated to this asset, as well as total utilities, energy, and water. We can also see any invoices associated to this asset. Now, if I click on performance, it will show whatever modality of energy or water is associated to the asset. So in this instance, we have electricity and water. There is no gas. Looking at this performance graph, the solid bars are consumption, the black line is for charges, and if there were projects associated to this asset within electricity, there would be a purple dot somewhere across the line. Now, real use or use case scenarios for this is if a client, for example, was changing all their light globes from standard globes to LEDs within streetlights, they may put a project in the system, which would show up here, and then look at the trending details of the information after that project, i.e. to see if, in fact, they had reduced cost or reduced usage. Now, if I click on accounts, the accounts or the active accounts for this specific asset are now in view. As with many other areas, there's a simple toggle to show anything that's been closed. Similarly to with users being able to see disabled users, you can see closed accounts. So we can see that this Aurora Energy account was closed. So when accounts get closed with suppliers, the data does not disappear. We can close the account in the system, which then still gives you access to be able to view that historic data. Now, as you can see, it shows the provider, the account details, any tags against the account, the connection point ID, and any connection point tags, as well as any meter details if they're in the system and the status of the account. If I were to click on one of the accounts, we'll see that a bunch of new links have opened up from the right-hand side. Similarly to the links that were available for the asset, we have view more details, edit, and performance. The difference is with the account level, you also have collected data and invoices that you can view, as well as being able to add notes. Now, there's also some data based on this specific account that we've clicked on as kind of a quick view for that account. Now, the thing to highlight here is, as previously mentioned, data can come in two ways, either invoices or raw data. Now, invoices, when generated in the system, will show various bits of information, including the invoice number, the due date, supplier account, the date from and to, consumption, total, and whether if it's been put on utility control or not, and if it's been processed. These will not show if you're not on utility control or haven't subscribed to the utility control module. The thing to be aware of is when in the invoices area, any dollar amount will be including GST. When viewing the collected data, any dollar amount is excluding GST. And the reason for that is with collected data, because it is raw data that is sent through from the supplier, they send that raw data excluding the GST. So as you can see, there's also a little icon here that allows the PDF of that specific invoice to be viewed. So we can see all 4 pages for the invoice with all the data. The thing to be aware of is if this specific invoice was part of a consolidated invoice, i.e. it had 50 invoices in it, the system is designed that if you were to click to view the invoice, it would jump to the correct page to view that specific invoice. So if this invoice was page 30 of a 50-page document, clicking on the view PDF would jump to page 30. So you'd be able to see the correct page associated with this information. Now, if we go over to collected data, you'll see that it shows show invoice, but here it does not. What that means is this line of text was raw data from the supplier. This line, so line 1 and line 3, have come from the invoice, so the invoice data has been copied over. The simple reason for that is invoice data will show all the data for the invoices. Collected data will show all data that we have. And that's in line with the fact that sometimes suppliers will send raw data, sometimes they show invoices. So having all of it in one location means that you can see a continuation of the data as it goes along. Similarly to the assets as well, if you were wanting to have a look at a different account number, there is the option to go through the accounts and also search for an account as well. Again, as highlighted before, this makes the need to go back and forwards within the system kind of obsolete, as you can just keep moving forward and moving forward. Next, I will cover the Power BI reporting system. So approximately 18 months ago, Azility moved from Yellowfin reporting system to the Power BI reporting system. The previous reporting system required the user to choose what information variables they wanted to see and generate a report. The beauty of Power BI is this will update reports in real time as the user selects different filters. So what you'll see is we have a couple of high level or main folders for reports. The fiscal year reporting and calendar year reporting are almost identical in the fact that both the core and emissions reports are the same. However, one reports on a fiscal year, the other one reports on the calendar year. Now that was because primarily Azility works with local governments, and local government do require some reporting in calendar year and some reporting in financial year. Now the core reports, the electricity, gas and water reports look identical. They function the same, they look the same, they just cover the different areas of electricity, gas and water. Looking at the core electricity report, all these core reports, the electricity, the gas and the water usage and cost, will function and be able to be filtered identically. So we can choose a base year that the client would like to compare their data from. You can choose a financial year that you're looking at, and that financial year will actually update this collected data table down the bottom right-hand side. You can choose to look at individual quarters or group quarters. So if I chose Q1, you'll notice immediately the graphs have changed. And this is what I was referring to when saying that previously you'd have to generate a report. This changes the report in real time. You can choose to view specific all org units or specific ones. So if you just wanted to look at operation centers, if there was data in there, you would be able to see it. And then again, you can look at the different assets or select multiple assets at once. This window shows the annual electricity usage for the client. This will show you the cost that the client has spent over that period of time, and this will show the actual amount the supplier has charged. You'll notice that I've just clicked section of each of these graphs. When doing so, it'll actually change the report and highlight based on what's selected. This is roughly a 5-year rundown of data over the last 5 years. It was deemed that 5 years was enough for this report, as otherwise the report would be too large and too busy to see. However, with some of these reports, which I will cover shortly, you are able to duplicate these reports into personal reports to adjust how you wish. The bottom left-hand side shows a year-on-year comparison, usage and cost. So, for example, we can see that this specific client let me just adjust this by financial year. You'll see that this specific client went down over the first sort of year and then started increasing for usage and for cost. The next tab shows the performance breakdown summary. This is the organization units that the client has. So if I were to right click on one of these organization units and drill down, it will drill down to all the assets within that organization unit. If I right click on this and show as table, where it is an option to show as a table on any of these graphs, you can then actually view that specific section of the report as a table, where it gives just more access to the information and easier to view. If we go over to the next tab, you'll be able to see performance increases for the asset, and that will be broken down by usage increases and cost increases. Now, it has been set up to be 10 assets as a standard. You can change this up to 20 assets as part of the filters available within the report, or you can do as low as 1 asset. Now, again, if I were to change the organization unit to sewer, it would then adjust anything that falls under the sewer organization unit to show only that information. Then the next tab, while this is asset increases, the next tab is asset decreases. So it'll show any decreases in usage. So what it does show is usage, the change, in kilowatts, usage and change in kilowatts, the percentage change, the cost, and the cost per kilowatt hour. Be aware that on any of these reports, the cost per kilowatt hour includes service charges. So what you may find is assets that don't use a lot of energy, for example, or electricity, for example, might have slightly higher cost per kilowatt hour because of those service charges. This is not something that is available to be shown without the service charges added, as it's not something that can be done currently in Power BI. So another report to look at is the emissions overview report. So about 12 months ago, Agility changed their emissions overview, or upgraded, if you will, to be a little bit more in depth. The emissions now shows location-based and market-based emissions, as opposed to just bunching them all together. You can view the gross emissions from all scopes, scope 1 and 2 and scope 3. Then there is the emissions performance breakdown, whereas it will show everything in a table broken down. What you will notice is here it has fuel as well as gas, electricity, but you can also add other sources of emissions as well. So, for example, landfill. That is something that you would need to speak to support about to get the template for waste emissions. Looking at the emissions through like the net emissions, this includes any offsets from green or PPA contracts. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a location where you could add contracts into the system that will impact this data to show any information taking those contracts into consideration. Then you can look at the net emissions performance breakdown. Again, it will break down based on those contracts, but it will also break down based on the sources of emissions. And if we look, you'll see the electricity gross was 465,000 roughly, whereas the net is 313,000, because it is taking into consideration any offsets from contracts. And then you can have a look at the emissions based, or the market based and location based off activity. And again, this is broken down quite heavily as well. Some other reports that are worth knowing about, which can make a difference. First, we'll look at the organization mapping extract. As I mentioned previously about orphaned accounts and orphaned assets, this is where we would be able to have a look and see where orphaned accounts and orphaned assets show. So as you'll see here, it says unknown organization unit. That means that we have in the system information based on a connection point ID, but it is not associated to an account or an asset or an organization unit. So as mentioned, if it was a couple of unknowns, then we would encourage the client to update themselves. But as there is such a large quantity here, the support staff or the client can extract this and fill out the information where necessary. Any Power BI reports that appear as raw data can be exported with these three dots. You can export data, click export, and that'll export it as a CSV. Now you'll see as well there's other information here, so it shows any organization unit tags, the asset names, any asset tags, and responsible users. These can be helpful when looking to pull up reports based off asset tags or responsible users. So when pulling up reports, and I'll show you an example. If, for example, we wanted to look at the emissions overview, we can click on the button here and then base that report off various filters here. So if I wanted to look at a report based off anything that's got traffic as an asset tag, it will then change the report. Clearly, asset traffic has no emissions, otherwise there would be data here. However, that's an example of how being able to filter off tags can actually pull up specific reports for you with specific data. The other report or other reports that are worth looking at is this heat map. So the heat map report will show where there is data gaps. So anywhere there is a 0 is a good number. That's how many days there are without data. So this specific account, the system has 100% of data, whereas the account before, as you'll see, the amount of days that are missing data, it's safe to say that that whole year it does not have data for. This report and a missing invoice report, which is an internal report for Azility staff, is how the Azility client data team look for data. So Azility has a support team and a client data team. The client data team will typically work looking for client data or trying to obtain missing data for clients, whereas the support team is exactly as it sounds, they provide support. Other reports to be aware of is the invoice detail data report. And this shows every single bit of data available in the system that has come off each and every invoice. So you will see consumption estimated looking at peak. We can see max demand and total demand. Anything that is generated off the invoice will be here. If it's not on the invoice, it will not be in the system. Finally, a few other reports that are worth looking at around the emissions side of things is the annual waste emissions. This report, depending on what information has been provided, will actually break down all waste emissions. So again, if I was to show this as a table, it would then give a bit more of a view, as well as how it's fallen into different categories. So for example, for these specific years and quarters, there was food waste. That is something that is great for keeping or helping keep track of any waste emissions that you may have. As previously mentioned, you'll just need to reach out to support to get the waste template. The other report to be aware of around emissions is the fuel report. Now, with fuel data, Agility will receive data mostly from clients. The frequency is up to the client. Some clients will send it monthly, some will send it quarterly. There are a couple that send it every year. That is entirely at the discretion of the client. The thing to be aware of is with the fuel data, if you're reporting on emissions and you're not regularly sending the fuel data, what will happen is it will skew the data and the emissions report. While the system is good at estimating data based on historic data, if you do have fuel data that varies quite significantly from year to year, then there is the potential that the data you're getting for emissions will not be as solid as it would be if Agility was receiving fuel regularly. As you'll see, this report has a very precise breakdown of all the different types of fuels that are being sent, the amounts, and it's breaking down the fuel usage, the cost, and the fuel mix on what you've actually sent through. You'll be able to see the annual emission sources from fuel usage. So, for example, diesel was the biggest consumer for this specific client. And then the important thing is the data completeness. So this will show, again, as per the heat map, where there are zeros is great because that's how many days without data. Where there's numbers is how many days there was data missing. So, for example, for the first 3 years of data here, there was no data sent to Agility for the biodiesel. Now, this may be because they only started using biodiesel from this point on. However, it's something to note that it does keep track of what is or isn't in the system. Another report that's worth looking at is the meters report. As previously mentioned, with the meter minder or the meters subscription, this will show reports around the real-time reporting. Typically, Agility partners with Watt Watchers, which is who the data comes in from. That data can be as regularly as every 5 seconds, up to every hour. However, we find that most clients do not need or do not want 5-second reporting. They typically go for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or half an hour. This report will break down that overview of the data that's being received. So we'll see the different devices, the generated electricity exported to the grid, as well as what has been consumed, energy consumed and produced. If we look at detailed performance, it'll show the generation and consumed and imported from the grid and exported from the grid as well. And I can specifically highlight or choose the different areas that I want to view. As with any of the reports in the system, these graphs, if they are clickable, it will change what you're looking at based on what you've clicked. The device daily profile data will show all the data specifically for the device as a daily profile. Again, you can choose specific devices to be able to see, which will actually show the data a little bit neater. And you can also filter by assets. And then a detailed performance by channel. So we can see the different channels of information that are coming in, and we can choose what we want to view. The last report I want to bring your attention to is the performance review. Agility does offer quarterly performance reviews for clients to review the data. However, this is a report that is available to all clients at all times if they were to want to review their data at the end of each quarter themselves. What we do find is typically clients do not want to report on leased assets because they're not responsible for the cost and usage or the emissions for the leased asset. So we would typically remove the leased asset to view the data. Now, how this is usable or effective is you're able to see any large percentage swings that happen within your data for that quarter. So for example, these bars had a 3,500% increase. Now, how this plays in real life is, for example, there have been clients that have looked at water data and said that asset has had a 500% increase, but it shouldn't, as it has not been used as much as it normally is. They see that data in the system, they go out on site and discover that the asset has a leaky pipe, hence the reason the water usage has gone up. So this report can be quite effective to help highlight these sort of data anomalies to help the client go out on site to ensure there's nothing wrong at the asset. The other thing with Power BI to be aware of is these system reports cannot be broken. You can filter them the way you want to filter them. However, you cannot break the reports, and any filtering that you do, if you don't know how you've gotten there and you want to reset the report, you just need to exit the report and come back in. However, as per what I was mentioning about the electricity report and saying that it only showed 5 financial years, if you wanted to have a version of that report that showed 10 instead of 5, you could then click this button, which is copy report to personal reports. This will then copy the report over, which you can then go into and edit the report. Now, as Power BI is a Microsoft product, any visual tools that are within any of the Microsoft products can be utilized in here for the reports. I won't go in depth on how to edit or change reports. We do have 2 webinars, and there will be a training video for Power BI that can be viewed as well. Be aware that any personal reports you have here with this button can be shared to anyone within the organization that has access to Agility. Now, with these shared reports, if someone wanted to edit the report slightly, they can then copy it to a personal report, edit it, and then reshare it back into the business. So as you'll see, there's a couple of reports here that are identical, except one is version 2. That is a report that someone has edited, shared in the business. Someone else has created a version for themselves or copied it to their personal reports, edited, and then shared it back within the business again. This is a really great way to have kind of customized reports that you want to share with the business without having to guide people on how to get the report that you've done, i.e. edit the same way. Okay, this is the end of the video. Now, as previously mentioned, there are other videos that can be viewed. If you're interested in more information or a walkthrough on how to utilize utility control, the reporting systems, the emissions, or projects, meter minder, and best case uses, please contact support@agility.co, and they will be able to provide you links to be able to view these other reports or these other training sessions. Okay, so that is the end of this training session. Okay, so that is the end of this training video. There are other videos available around the use of utility control, the reporting system, and utilizing Power BI to its fullest, emissions, including how to add green contracts, assign green contracts to assets, and how the data is viewed in Power BI, and also another video on project, meter minder, and best case uses for the platform. If you would like access to any of these videos or to discuss further any questions around support or the platform itself, please email support@azility.co. Thank you.